In August 2021, 25-year-old Jelani Day was starting his semester at Illinois State University in Normal, Illinois. Inspired by a childhood friend with a speech impediment, Jelani was pursuing his master's in speech-language pathology. According to his family and professors, he was a responsible person who rarely skipped classes, so his instructor found it odd when he failed to attend his afternoon lecture on August 24th. The next day, his mother, Carmen, couldn't get him on the phone, and he missed his classes for a second day. Perturbed by his uncharacteristic absence, his program director reported the young man missing on August 25th. Everything seemed to be in place at his apartment, but his phone and white Chrysler 300 were nowhere to be found. With no further clues, police began to piece together his last movements. He was seen on campus at 7:20 a.m. on August 24th. ISU security footage captured Jelani entering the Bones Student Center wearing a blue button-down, black pants, and black dress shoes. 2 hours later, Jelani was spotted at the Beyond Hello dispensary, about 3 miles from the ISU campus. Security cameras recorded him entering the building right around 9:12 a.m. He was dressed casually in white shorts, a Jimi Hendrix t-shirt, and a Detroit Lions baseball hat. He purchased a joint and left. After his trip to the dispensary, there was no further security camera footage, and no one came forward with a sighting. The afternoon after he was reported missing, on Thursday, August 26th, a worker arriving for his shift at the local YMCA in Peru, Illinois, noticed a white car partially concealed in a wooded area behind the building. He called the police to investigate, and though the vehicle was missing its license plate, they identified it as Jelani's missing Chrysler. A partially smoked blunt was recovered inside, along with the hat and shirt he was last seen wearing. Peru is a small town about 60 miles north of ISU. To his family's knowledge, Jelani had never been to Peru and had no connections to the area. Jelani and his phone remained missing. A preliminary search was launched, utilizing drones and canine units. Unfortunately, there was a large gap in communication between the authorities and Jelani's family. Frustrated by this, Carmen Day, Jelani's mother, organized a volunteer search in the area. On September 4th, an unidentified male body was found on the south bank of the Illinois River, just east of the Illinois 251 bridge. The man was clad in a white undershirt-style tank top and Calvin Klein boxer briefs, with a black sweatshirt tied around his waist. The shorts and shoes Jelani was last seen wearing were discovered across the river on the opposite bank. Despite many assuming that the deceased man was him, it still took police weeks to correctly identify his remains. This delay was exceedingly painful for his family and sharply criticized by the public. It wasn't until Thursday, September 23rd, 19 days after the discovery, that Bloomington police announced that the body found by the river was Jelani.
Today, the LaSalle County Coroner's Office identified the male body that was found on September 4th as Jelani Day of Bloomington, Illinois. This was done through forensic dental identification and DNA testing and comparison.
The coroner's report noted non-toxic levels of caffeine, nicotine, and marijuana, and the official cause of death was labeled as drowning. There were no apparent signs of violence, but his body was also in an advanced state of decomposition, possibly concealing the actual cause of death. Carmen, noting that Jelani was a strong swimmer, was outspoken in her belief that her son was the victim of foul play. However, the manner of his death has remained officially undetermined. 6 weeks after the discovery of his body, a man driving on Interstate 55 in Bloomington pulled over and happened upon Jelani's shattered iPhone. Bloomington police turned it over to the FBI for analysis, but after a year and a half, the agency returned it, stating that they could not unlock it. Carmen, justifiably enraged, managed to crack the passcode in 10 days. Unfortunately, once unlocked, the phone yielded little evidentiary value. The device was powered off shortly after Jelani left the dispensary on that fateful day, and no helpful messages, contacts, or clues pointed the Day family in any direction. In 2022, NBC Chicago reported that unknown DNA was discovered on Jelani's shorts, but there is no further information about this potential clue at the time of recording. Over 3 years after the untimely death of her son, Carmen is left with no answers. Law enforcement claims they are pursuing every possible angle, but after the missteps she has seen throughout the investigation, she is fearful that the case will remain unsolved. On a Facebook Live on the 3rd anniversary of Jelani's passing, she stated, "The Jelani Day Task Force has not paid attention or even done the things necessary to find out what happened to him. Jelani was a bright and conscientious young man. Before his death, he was preparing to donate his bone marrow to his father, who was sick with leukemia. Jelani was the best possible match, and he was willing to do anything to help his family. Sadly, his father passed in April 2022, compounding the pain of the Day family. If you have any information about Jelani Day's case, there is still a $10,000 reward. Any tips should be reported to either the FBI or the Bloomington Police Department at the numbers on the screen. In 2013, 19-year-old Bryce Laspisa was excited to begin his sophomore year at Sierra College. In mid-August, he left his parents' home in Laguna Niguel, California, an affluent town about 50 miles south of Los Angeles, and drove north to the Sacramento area for school. However, once classes started, things began to unravel. Both his girlfriend, Kim Sly, and his best friend, Sean Dixon, noted that his behavior was odd. He started taking Vyvanse, a prescription amphetamine to treat ADHD, and he began regularly drinking. Bryce, who didn't have ADHD, told Kim that he took the drug to stay awake and play video games. On August 27th, he abruptly broke up with Kim via text and sent an uncharacteristically emotional message to Sean that read, "I love you, bro. Seriously. You are the best person I've ever met. You saved my soul." He also gifted Sean his Xbox and a pair of diamond earrings his mother had given him. The following day, Sean called Bryce's mother, Karen, and told her he didn't think he was acting normally. Later that night, Karen received a call from Bryce. He was at Kim's apartment, and alarmed by his behavior, Kim had taken the keys to his Toyota Highlander. Karen spoke with Kim and instructed her to give Bryce his keys. After she did so, Karen told her son to head home and get some sleep. Karen was worried enough about Bryce that she offered to fly to Northern California, but he told her to wait. He promised to call her the next day, noting that he had a lot of things to talk to her about. At 11:30 p.m. that night, Bryce left Kim's apartment. Rather than going back home, he began driving south. Around 1 a.m., he phoned his mother again. At first, she assumed he was calling from his apartment, but in reality, he had begun the 8-hour drive to his parents' house in Laguna Niguel. At 11 a.m. the next morning, August 29th, his parents were notified by their car insurance company that Bryce had used roadside assistance after running out of gas near Buttonwillow, a small town west of Bakersfield on Interstate 5. Unable to reach their son, the Laspisas called Castro Tire and Gas, the company that had responded to their son's call for help. Christian, the owner, told them he delivered 3 gallons of fuel to Bryce around 9 a.m. He offered to return to where he met Bryce to see if there were any clues for the Laspisas. Shockingly, Christian found Bryce exactly where he left him, sitting silently inside his car. Christian urged him to drive the remaining 3 hours to Laguna Niguel, and Bryce left around 3 p.m. 6 hours ticked by, and with no sign of life from their son, the Laspisas filed a missing persons report at the Orange County Sheriff's Department. Luckily, officers were able to ping his phone and found him just a few miles south of where Christian had waved goodbye. He was still in the Bakersfield area and no closer to home. During their interaction with the young man, police described him as lucid and friendly, with no obvious signs of disturbance or intoxication. Officers searched his vehicle and found no drugs or alcohol. They did note that Bryce seemed hesitant to contact his parents and only spoke to them once the police dialed the number for him. Karen told him to come home as soon as possible, and she called Christian and begged him to see Bryce off for her. He obliged and phoned to inform her that he witnessed Bryce heading south on I-5. At 2 a.m. on August 30th, Bryce called his mother for the final time. He stated that he was too tired to continue the drive to Orange County and was stopping for a nap. At 8 a.m., a California highway patrolman arrived at their home and informed them that Bryce's car was found abandoned near Castaic Lake. This large reservoir is just north of Los Angeles and only an hour and a half away from their home in Laguna Niguel. The car, discovered around 5:30 a.m., was on its side and appeared to have rolled off the road 15 feet down into a ravine. The tracks at the scene indicated that his vehicle accelerated down the embankment and no brakes were applied. His back window was broken in a manner that suggested Bryce had exited through it. His phone, laptop, and wallet were all inside, but Bryce was nowhere to be seen. A search of the area yielded no results, though CCTV footage did capture Bryce's car driving along Lake Hughes Road near Castaic Lake at 2:15 a.m. and again at 4:30 a.m. Since then, there has been no sign of Bryce. Some believe that he suffered from some kind of psychotic break and that he took his own life. Others think he used the accident as an opportunity to run away and start anew. Sadly, there is no concrete evidence that has gotten the Laspisa family any closer to finding their son.
We keep hope alive. We have heard stories of people that have been missing for years and that are found. And that's always our hope, that we keep our faith that Bryce will be found.
When Bryce disappeared, he was 19 years old, 5'11", and 170 pounds. He has distinctive red hair, and his eyes have been described as both green and blue. He has a tattoo on the left shoulder of a Taurus bull head and his birth date in Roman numerals, and both of his ears are pierced. He would now be 30 years old. If you have any information on the whereabouts of Bryce Laspisa, please call the number on the screen. Around 5:30 p.m. on Friday, January 17, 2020, police in Arlington, Virginia arrived at the AVA Ballston Square apartments. They were responding to a 911 call stating that a resident had suffered from a cardiac arrest. Upon entering the unit, officers noted that the dwelling smelled strongly of bleach, and then they found 24-year-old Scott Ratigan in his bed. However, contrary to the information relayed in the emergency call, the young man seemed to have suffered far worse than a heart attack. Declared dead at the scene, official reports are vague, but indicate that Scott died as a result of severe trauma to his upper body. Dispatch audio released to the media notes that there was blood coming from his mouth, his hands, and his neck. His death was ruled a homicide.
It's going to be for a 24-year-old male with blood coming from his mouth, hands, and neck. No weapons were seen. There are a total of 4 people in the apartment. Also noted that it smells like bleach.
The scene was remarkably clean, and authorities, remembering the bleach smell in the unit, believe the murderer meticulously tidied after committing the crime. Scott had, by all appearances, a relatively low-risk lifestyle, splitting his time between sports, work, and friends. He and one of his sisters lived together in a nice apartment building that seemed relatively secure. Despite the veneer of security at his building, residents of the AVA Ballston have since spoken out online, denouncing the complex's security measures. At the time of Scott's death, it was reportedly easy to get in and out without a key fob. It would have been simple for the perpetrator to follow a resident into the building. Additionally, a public directory in the lobby supplied the residents' names and unit numbers, and access to the elevators was not limited. As far as the public knows, Scott wasn't involved in risky businesses, behaviors, or relationships. Additionally, nothing was reported stolen or missing from the residence, making a robbery gone wrong scenario unlikely. In 2021, Arlington PD released surveillance footage that appeared to show a person of interest arriving at and later leaving the AVA Ballston at the time of Scott's murder. The suspect in question is thought to be male, standing between 5'6" and 5'8", and likely 170 pounds. He is dressed in all black, carrying a black backpack with the logo taped over, and obscuring his face with a mask. The clothes appear new without much wear and tear, and all come from pricier brands like the North Face, Under Armour, and Nike. It is worth remembering that this crime occurred in January 2020, before the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic in the United States. So, although wearing a mask in public seems commonplace to us now, this would not have been the case at the time of Scott's murder. The most distinctive characteristic seen in the footage is the man's gait, which is pigeon-toed, meaning that his feet point slightly inward. People online have criticized the police, wondering why it took them a year to release this crucial footage. On the Friday in question, Scott called out of work. Some believe that Scott was expecting to meet someone, but others argue that since Monday was a holiday, Scott just wanted to extend his long weekend. There were no signs of forced entry to the apartment, so Scott either knew the person in question or expected someone to arrive. Though the timestamps are removed from the footage showing the suspect, online sleuths have used the sun angle in the video to calculate that he was likely headed towards Scott's place between 10:30 and 11:30 a.m. and leaving around 12:30 to 12:50 p.m. Friends state that they last heard from Scott around 1 p.m., and there was no further activity until his sister arrived home in the evening and called 911. The details available to the public at the time of recording are frustratingly sparse, but the Ratigan family is offering a $50,000 reward for any information that leads to the arrest of the individual responsible for their son's death. If you have any knowledge about the slaying of Scott Ratigan, we ask that you contact the numbers provided on the screen. In 1976, Leah Roberts was born to Nancy and Stancil Roberts, joining older siblings Kara and Heath. Growing up in Durham, North Carolina, Lee was described as bright and creative. At 18, she began studying at North Carolina State University. While in college, Leah faced serious challenges. Both of her parents died, and in the fall of 1998, she was in a serious car accident that punctured her lung and broke her femur so badly that a metal rod had to be inserted. With only a few months left to finish her degree, Leah opted to drop out of NCSU, despite Kara and Heath's objections. She used her newfound free time to explore her artistic side and adopt a kitten. Her roommate and friend Nicole Bennett recalled that Leah frequently expressed her desire to go on a road trip to the West Coast, inspired by one of her favorite writers, Jack Kerouac. On the evening of March 9, 2000, when Nicole came home, Leah and her white 1993 Jeep Cherokee were nowhere to be found. At first, she wasn't concerned. Leah kept odd, inconsistent hours, especially since she dropped out of school, but the following day, she alerted Kara. By March 13th, friends and family still hadn't heard from Leah, so Kara reported her sister as missing. Kara went to Leah's apartment and searched her room with Nicole. The pair realized that many of Leah's clothes, as well as her new kitten, were gone. Leah also left a note for Nicole with enough money to cover the next month's rent and bills. The note mentioned Jack Kerouac, had a drawing of the Cheshire Cat's grin, and a line that read, "I'm not suicidal, I'm the opposite." Disturbed, Kara accessed Leah's financial records and saw that her sister had taken several $1,000s out of the account on March 9th. A string of charges that began with a motel room in Memphis, Tennessee, tracked Leah's movements as she moved west across Interstate 40 and north along Interstate 5 once she reached I-40's terminus in Barstow, California. The final charge on the card was after midnight on March 13th at a gas station in Brooks, Oregon. Security footage obtained from the location confirmed that it was Leah making the purchase, and she seemed to be alone, alive, and well. On the morning of March 18th, a couple on Canyon Creek Road, 30 miles east of Bellingham, Washington, saw clothing scattered along the side of the road and tied to the nearby trees. Intrigued, the two stopped and discovered a severely damaged white Jeep Cherokee. Police identified the vehicle as Leah's, and though the car had sustained serious damage, there was no sign of her and no indication the vehicle had been occupied when it crashed. The car was full of Leah's belongings, including her passport and driver's license. Cat food and an empty cat carrier were also found, as well as $2,500 in cash, her mother's diamond engagement ring, and other valuable jewelry. The discovery of the engagement ring was particularly foreboding. Leah was very attached to it and would have never willingly taken it off. Among her belongings, they found a ticket stub for the March 13th, 2:10 p.m. showing of the movie American Beauty at the Bellis Fair shopping mall. With this clue, nearby businesses were canvassed in hopes someone remembered Leah. Two male customers at a restaurant recalled meeting Leah on March 13th. The three had all chatted at the restaurant's counter. One of the men recalled Leah leaving with a man she called Barry. He gave the police a description of the man, and a sketch was generated. However, no one else has corroborated Barry's existence. Around the same time, an anonymous man phoned the Whatcom County Sheriff and reported a sighting of Leah. He said his wife saw her looking confused and lost at a gas station in Everett, Washington, about 60 miles south of Bellingham. When police attempted to gain more information from the caller, he panicked and hung up. No further evidence was uncovered, and the case languished for years. In 2006, new investigators realized Leah's car had never been fully processed. The vehicle was re-examined, and they found that a wire under the hood had been cut, further inflaming suspicions that it had been tampered with and the crash was staged. A fingerprint was also found under the hood, and male DNA was discovered on a piece of Leah's clothing. The man who reported that Leah had left the restaurant with the mysterious Barry was compared to both the fingerprint and the DNA. He was not a match for the fingerprint, but at the time of recording, the DNA results are not publicly known. No further trace of Leah or her kitten has been found. Some think that Leah took her own life, or that dangerous wild animals killed her and scattered her remains. Others believe that she was a victim of foul play, and that the car was carefully staged to cover up the crime. At the time of her vanishing, Leah was 23 years old and stood at 5'6". She was roughly 130 pounds, with short blonde hair and blue eyes. She has a surgical scar on her right hip and a distinctive beauty mark above the right side of her mouth. She would now be in her late 40s. If you have any information about Leah's whereabouts or her ill-fated journey west, please contact the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office at the number on the screen. The DuPont de Ligonnès were a large, aristocratic, and devoutly Catholic family. They consisted of the father, Xavier, the mother, Agnes, and their 4 children, 20-year-old Arthur, 18-year-old Thomas, 16-year-old Anne, and 13-year-old Benoit. The family rented a modest home on 55 Boulevard Robert Schumann in the western suburbs of Nantes, France. After overseeing a string of failed businesses and borrowing money from both his and Agnes's families, Xavier was desperate. By 2011, the family was in financial trouble, and Agnes and Xavier's marriage was floundering. Unbeknownst to Agnes, Xavier began an affair. The anonymous woman was financially successful and loaned Xavier 50,000 euros. A few months later, he begged her for more money. In one email, he told her, "I don't sleep anymore," and lay awake with morbid ideas, such as burning down the house after giving everyone sleeping pills. Repulsed, the woman ended the affair and initiated legal proceedings to recover the money he owed her. By April, things were unraveling for Xavier, and people began to notice some odd behaviors from the family. On Friday, April 1st, Arthur uncharacteristically failed to collect his monthly wages from his job. The following Monday, April 4th, Anne and Benoit were absent from school, and their friends couldn't reach them online. That evening, Xavier and Thomas were spotted dining at an upscale restaurant near Angers. Staff recalled that the two barely spoke during the meal and that Thomas appeared sick. At some point during this week, Xavier phoned Agnes's employer and informed them that she was sick with gastroenteritis. 2 days later, the employer received a text, allegedly from Agnes, noting that she'd been hospitalized and was unavailable by phone. The next day, April 5th, Thomas was spending the evening with his friend in Angers, but left suddenly when he received a call from Xavier telling him to return to Nantes for a family emergency. The same friend tried to reach Thomas multiple times afterward, but only received brief, strange messages brushing him off. Neighbors of the Ligonnès also noted that the family's 2 dogs howled non-stop for the nights of April 4th and 5th. Xavier was seen several times in the following days, making trips in and out of the house and loading his car, a metallic blue Citroën C5, with multiple heavy bags. The next week, the oddities continued. Agnes's employer received a note stating that she was quitting because the family was relocating to the United States. Anne and Benoit's school received a letter withdrawing their enrollment, stating that the family was moving to Australia. Xavier's family also received letters telling them he had secretly been working for the American DEA and that the whole family now had to relocate to the United States as part of the Federal Witness Protection Program. He instructed them to spread a rumor that they had moved to Australia. By April 11th, Xavier was heading southeast. A series of credit card charges tracked his journey through Toulouse, Le Pontet, and La Seine-sur-Mer, just outside of Marseille. On April 14th, he was last seen on the surveillance camera at the Hotel Formule 1 in Roquebrune-sur-Argens, about an hour west of Nice. He abandoned his Citroën in the hotel's parking lot on the morning of April 15th and hasn't been seen since. Meanwhile, in Nantes, an uneasy silence reigned at the Ligonnès house. The shutters were closed, the dogs were quiet, and none of the family members had been spotted for days. The police were called on April 13th, and an investigation was launched. On April 19th, authorities discovered that Xavier had purchased cement, burlap bags, quicklime, shovels, plastic bin liners, and plastic paving slabs in late March. The lease on the house had been terminated. All the bank accounts connected to the family had been closed. The children's school had received a payment settlement, and a note was placed on the mailbox stating, "Return all mail to sender. Thank you." On Thursday, April 21st, the bodies of Agnes and her 4 children, along with the 2 family dogs, were discovered underneath the patio in the back garden of the home. Autopsies revealed that all the victims were sedated and then shot by a .22 long rifle. Though the times of death for the family members remain uncertain, authorities mostly agree that Agnes, Arthur, Anne, and Benoit were all slain between the night of April 3rd and the morning of April 4th. Thomas, who was in a separate grave, was likely killed on the evening of April 5th. The manhunt for Xavier has spanned multiple years and countries, but at the time of recording, he has never been found. Some hypothesize that he could have fled to a monastery to hide as a monk. The Saint-Desert monastery in the village where Xavier was last seen was raided in 2018, but to no avail. The following year, in 2019, a man with a stolen French passport was apprehended in the Glasgow airport in Scotland, and he was initially believed to be Xavier, but this later proved to be false. Some, particularly his sister Christine, rabidly defend Xavier's innocence. She believes that her brother and his family are living in hiding in the United States, and that the bodies found at the Ligonnès family home are not Agnes and the children. Others believe that Xavier, feeling like he had no other options, took his own life after slaying his family. They point to his final drive to the south of France as a kind of goodbye tour, because he barely bothered to hide his identity and frequently used his credit card. Yet some believe he could still be out there. There have been many unsubstantiated sightings of him over the years, and authorities remain vigilant. If you have any information about the whereabouts of Xavier DuPont de Ligonnès, you can contact Crime Stoppers International at the web address on the screen. We truly hope that one day all 5 of these cases will be solved. We'd like to hear your theories below. What happened to Jelani and Scott? Where are Bryce and Leah? Is Xavier still alive? Keep your eyes and ears open out there, and as always, thanks for watching.